Okay, we've seen that the ANC's Provincial Executive Committee is expected to announce its decision on the fate of suspended Gauteng Health MEC Dr. Bandile Masuku. This is after he was implicated in a PPE tender scandal. Now, while a report by the Provincial Integrity Commission found that Masuku did not influence the contract or benefit financially from it, it questioned his oversight over PPE contracts awarded by his department. On that note, Newzroom Africa's politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa, joins us to unpack this story a little bit more. Sbu, good morning. Thanks for joining us here bright and early on Weekend Dawn. Ultimately, can Dr. Bandile Masuku survive the scandal, or is it the end of the road for him?
Look, Liezle, I think that will be determined by the discussions at the Provincial Executive Committee meeting of the ANC today. We do know that they do have the report of the Integrity Commission, that's the Provincial Integrity Commission, which recommends that he be asked to step aside from his position in the PEC of the ANC. But obviously, there's a bigger debate about whether the Integrity Commission's recommendations have a bearing on his standing in government, because obviously this is an integrity commission of the ANC. It's not a government structure. It's not a disciplinary structure within government. It then becomes the decision of ultimately, in terms of his government position, it ultimately becomes the decision of the Premier David Makhura, where he decides on what to do. But I think whatever David Makhura does will be informed by the decision that is adopted today by the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC. And obviously, as I said, there will be robust debates both for and against Bandile Masuku, and at the end of the day, they will announce that decision. And I think it's dependent on that. He does have it looks like in terms of the overall charge or the overall case rather, whether there was any corruption on his part, looks like there's no finding in that regard. But however, the Integrity Commission does feel that he should have perhaps been more involved or more judicious in handling these things. Now, that's a subjective view, Liezle, because it's how I perceive your actions and how you perceive your actions are two issues that are dependent on one's subjective view. So I think that part about whether he should have exercised more oversight or whether he did exercise more oversight will be the subject of debate, which ultimately will lead to whatever decision that the Provincial Executive Committee takes.
Sbu, just looking at the bigger picture and contextualizing it a little bit further, I mean, you mentioned the issue of oversight and transparency, but ahead of the local government elections that are set to take place in 2021, I mean, ultimately, based on the factions that are happening in the ANC, Dr. Bandile Masuku under Premier David Makhura, ultimately also for President Cyril Ramaphosa, it seems. I mean, how is this going to impact, the list that is going to be issued by the ANC, which is also set to be taken very soon in lieu of these scandals erupting?
Look, ANC lists obviously are informed by nominations from various structures. And I think for now, perhaps the one link and how this links actually directly to the local government elections is that the ANC actually has a big problem in Gauteng, where in 2016 it did not win any of the metros. So how you see the manner in which the ANC is behaving in this instance is actually informed by the fact that they know that the voters of Gauteng punished the party in 2016. And therefore, if they are to win Johannesburg, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni outright, they would have to do more to convince the electorate in the province. So that is the one thing that is actually pushing Gauteng to behave, I would say, differently to other provinces, because they are feeling the pinch. They know that even in the last election in 2019, ANC in Gauteng won that election by, in fact, they attained 50.17%. Now, that's a whisker. It's less than 1%. So that has implications for the party going forward. So that is why it finds itself in this difficult position, having to decide what to do with one of its, what I would call its rising stars, Bandile Masuku, in this regard. If they are not seen to be tough enough, that might lead to the voters punishing the ANC in the polls, but also if they are seen to be serious about fighting corruption and wrongdoing, then perhaps their voters will reward them in the 2021 elections.
On that note, whilst Gauteng seems to be a little bit more serious about fighting corruption, I mean, why are the other ANC provinces not perhaps following suit?
Well, I guess, Liezle, because they're not threatened. I think that's the most simplistic response. But also ANC has a big problem when it comes to corruption, because corruption in the ANC, it cascades, it permeates all levels of leadership, from your local, your regional, provincial, up to national. So there is a reluctance on the part of the ANC to deal with corruption, because the reality is that most of its leaders are mired in corruption and wrongdoing. So that is why you see in other provinces that there's not that much appetite. I mean, there are stories even now, even today, that suggest that even though the ANC's National Executive Committee took a decision to say every member of the ANC who's facing serious charges should step aside, there is defiance. There is defiance. Zinhle Kanyane is doing a story today which is looking at defiance in the Northwest, given the fact that the interim provincial committee there took a decision to ask some mayors, chief whips, and in 5 municipalities to step aside. That defiance is informed by arrogance that we've seen there, in that the ANC has not been strong in tackling corruption. So the reason why Gauteng seems to be more serious about dealing with corruption is because Gauteng is threatened at the polls. So the reality is that it goes back to the issue whether the ANC can ever self-correct. I do not believe it can. I think the only way that the ANC will only change its ways is if it is threatened in the polls, or it is punished at the polls, as we have seen it happen in Gauteng.
Sbu, in conclusion, I mean, ultimately, how far is the processing of the Integrity Commission's report, and also looking at its effectiveness to date since its formation back in 2012? I mean, what does that standing look like?
Look, the Integrity Commission has actually gone through various phases. And that it was 2012 conference of the ANC in Mangaung set up an Integrity Commission, and that Integrity Commission was meant to be to deal with, in fact, to protect the ANC's image and integrity, and be the bridge between legal processes and internal party processes, where they can call you as a member, Liezle, and say, Liezle, we hear that you've got this case before court. Explain to us what it's about. And based on your explanation, they can decide whether you should step aside from your elected position in the party or not. But what has happened is that no one, the ANC, even the ANC itself, even though it set up this structure, it never took the Integrity Commission seriously. And secondly, the last conference of the ANC at Nasrec, it was supposed to give the Integrity Commission more teeth to be able to bite, but that also did not happen. In fact, it was only until the last National Executive Committee meeting of the ANC where the ANC seems to be now taking the Integrity Commission more seriously. But whether that translates to more people being held accountable, it remains to be seen. But insofar as the Bandile Masuku report is concerned, we understand that that report has been concluded. And remember, there is a National Integrity Commission and there are provincial integrity commissions. So Bandile Masuku was being investigated by the Provincial Integrity Commission that is led by Trevor Fowler. So that has been concluded. That is why today it will be debated at the Provincial Executive Committee meeting of the ANC. And afterwards, the results or a decision will be out by this afternoon. If not, according to the Provincial Secretary, we will know by tomorrow morning what the ultimate decision of the PEC is.
All right, Sbu Ngalwa, we're going to leave the conversation there. Newzroom Africa's politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa, giving us the latest with regards to the outcomes expected ahead of Dr. Bandile Masuku and presidential spokesperson Kusela Diko, of course, who were, implicated in a PPE scandal.